They told us campus was supposed to be safe. Dorms were meant to be temporary homes. Classrooms were places you crossed a hallway between lectures and felt the ordinary pulse of student life. The business school building should have felt sterile and professional, a place for calculators and late-night coffee. But safety is a fragile thing. It's built from locks that work, from people who follow rules, and from assumptions we all carry about the places we trust. These 3 stories are about the nights those assumptions broke. They're true accounts told by people who lived them, and they still live with the echo. Content warning. These are first-person accounts of intrusion, stalking, and an attempted abduction. Nothing graphic is described, but the subject matter can be triggering. If you need support, there are resources in the description. If you want more true school horror like this, hit subscribe. The first story comes from a freshman who moved into a small university dorm in West Virginia. She was on a tight budget. Everything about college felt like leftovers and second chances. The campus was small enough that people knew each other's majors, and the dorms were old. Narrow hallways, cheap carpet that never quite stopped smelling like last year's cooking experiments, and thin walls that let other people's music leak through at odd hours. Her roommate arrived with a different kind of presence. She seemed put together in a way that made the narrator assume privilege. Newer clothes, confidence, and ease with the campus map that suggested she wasn't overwhelmed by the smallest things. For a while, nothing felt off. They shared the quiet, awkward rituals of freshman roommates, deciding who would buy the communal broom, dividing the space for clothes, learning the tiny things about each other that don't matter until they do.
She stopped, stood frozen with one hand on the knob, because that little movement meant the world on the other side was not as empty as she wanted it to be. The first direct contact was small and simple, but it rewired something inside her. One night, she was lying on her stomach finishing a paper, headphones off because the silence helped her think. She felt a pressure along her back, then a hand rested on the nape of her neck. It was light but immediate. For a moment, she thought it was accidental. Maybe the roommate had come in to say something, but her body refused to move. The narrator writes that the sensation wasn't violent in the way movies make violence feel. It was a violation because it belonged where it shouldn't have, close, private, intimate without consent. The brain freezes in these small moments, trying to reconcile the meaning of what's happening with the need to do something. She didn't scream. She didn't call out. She lay still until the hand withdrew. After that, the room was different. Every inch felt surveilled. The narrator started small experiments, sleeping with the light on, leaving the door ajar, moving her pillow. She found small things in odd places, a sock on the floor she was sure she hadn't left out, a piece of hair on the pillow that she didn't recognize. The roommate's explanations were calm and practiced. She'd been out, she'd been at a friend's, she didn't remember. Administratively, things were also messy. During those months, campus occupancy was lower than usual. Doors were still locked, but the building systems were old. Maintenance knocked more frequently on certain floors. The narrator was told the school could offer police involvement, but she declined at first. It was complicated. She feared escalation, didn't want to make a scene that the school might only have support. Instead, she reported the incidents to housing, and they moved her to another room. Moving felt like a relief and a confusion at the same time. She could feel the breath she'd been holding exhale, but there was a new, brittle anxiety threaded through everything. The roommate came to the door at some point after she'd packed the last of her clothes. Standing there, the roommate asked where her new room was. The question had a flatness to it, an almost casual curiosity that made the narrator's skin crawl. She realized then that the person she'd shared a room with and had once thought quiet and neat had been closer in ways she hadn't imagined. Closer to her life, closer to her body, closer to her nights. She left, and the school changed her room. The police were offered as an option by housing. The narrator declined to pursue that route, choosing instead to prioritize distance and the smaller work of rebuilding safety.
After moving, ordinary things felt charged. Falling asleep alone took longer. The narrator noticed a sudden, irrational fear of people brushing too close in hallways.
She started locking her dorm room door even when she was inside and got a nightlight for the hall. She wondered about medications the roommate might have been prescribed, about previous roommates, about the thinness of the dorm's walls, and the ways people take advantages of assumed privacy. She wondered, too, whether she had done something to allow it, thoughts that survivors often confront, and which can be cruel because they are not about blame, but about control. She fought those thoughts back. Nothing she did justified being touched without consent. In the months that followed, the narrator treated it like a wound. She told a close friend who offered to walk her to class. She thought about reporting to police more than once, but the fear of reliving the details and the complicated dance of campus justice became a weight. The school had helped in one way. She had a new room. She was out of the old one, but the residue of being invaded stayed. The roommate remained an ambiguous figure at the edge of her memory, present, domestic, and unknowable. When I think of this story, what stays with me is the smallness of the moment that changes everything. Not a dramatic confrontation, not a shouted struggle, just a hand in the dark and a slow dawning realization that something you believed about your room was no longer true. That's often how these things happen, in the adjustments you don't notice, in the ways a space you thought belonged to you isn't yours anymore. If the first story is about invasion through proximity, the second is about invasion from above. This account takes place in a business school building that was supposed to be modern and secure. Doors that locked automatically, ID swipes for late hours, the faint antiseptic scent of cleaning supplies in the air at night. The narrator was working on an advanced statistics project, the kind of paper that demands staring at spreadsheets until the numbers look personal. She got there late when most of the building had emptied out. The fluorescent lights hummed. The chairs were the kind that left faint patterns on your thighs if you sat too long. The building had a clinical air, white walls, glass doors, the faint lingering odor of cleaning agents that smelled sharp and washed. At first, the night was ordinary in that way that feels both safe and a little lonely. She took the seat she always took, logged into the desktop, and let the glow of the monitor focus her. Time slipped. There was the distant thud of the facility's elevator and the soft clatter of the HVAC system. Somewhere in the building a vacuum ran and then stopped. Around midnight she noticed a door, one of the internal doors between corridors, slam. The slam was muffled at first, then echoed, as if someone had closed it with intention. When the door slammed again, she felt a prickle along her arms. She went back to her work but kept listening. Footsteps sounded faintly on the tile outside the lab, then silence.
The automatic locks engaged at a certain hour, but sometimes, she'd been told earlier in the term, maintenance or certain faculty could traverse certain doors. Occasionally, when someone fumbled an ID or had the badge flipped to the wrong side, the locking mechanism would register the activity with a soft hum. Then she began to hear something above her, an almost inaudible shuffle that made the ceiling seem not like a barrier, but a layer with someone moving within it. The ceiling tiles in those older buildings sat in a grid, not fully secure, easy for someone who knew a building's anatomy to lift and step into the cavity above. At first it sounded like settling, then a tile moved, sliding the slightest fraction and scraping against its frame. The sensation was banal and precise, a whisper of rubber, a tiny scrape. She kept her back to the room as if that would make her invisible. She imagined anyone up there, hunched and watching the glow of her monitor, seeing the skeleton of her night, the hoodie she wore, the book splayed across the desk, the cup of coffee with a lipstick smudge. The handle on the lab door rattled once, twice. The pattern was almost childish. Rattle, pause, rattle, retreat. It was as if whoever was outside wanted her to hear them. The narrator's description is careful. There was no physical contact, no direct violence, only a premeditated test of presence. Her breath got tight. She told herself to pack quietly, to minimize sound. The movement above her increased, like someone shifting their weight, like a slow, deliberate walk across the tiles. Then she heard a thump on the landing above the stairwell, a heavy boot or shoe hitting concrete. A shadow appeared on the stairwell window, a silhouette framed against emergency lighting. The narrator walked out, eyes flicking up the stairs, and saw him, a man perched on the landing, clothes torn in places, smiling in a way that made his teeth stand out. He didn't say anything. He just watched. That small, ridiculous smile was perhaps the worst part, the one that suggested the presence was not accidental, but chosen. The sprint out of the building is the part everyone remembers. Shorts, long strides, the kind of breathless run that leaves your lungs burning and your hair plastered to your forehead. She ran for the nearest exit, feet slipping on hurried steps, heart slapping against her ribs. The campus at that hour felt exposed,
An expanse of parking lots and empty walkways lit by sodium lamps, the hush of the night like a blanket that made every sound severe. She reached a safe place, called a friend, and someone came to meet her. At daylight, she went back with campus security. The ceiling tiles above her workstation were gone, lifted or removed. A grid opened like a mouth. Someone had used the cavity as a vantage point, peering down at the room where students worked alone.
It was chilling, because it confirmed a suspicion that had been lodged in her chest, that someone had been watching more than once. Security logged it. The school took it seriously, tightened certain protocols, and made a record. But the feeling remained. The building that had been designed to hold students in by locking doors had a vulnerability above, a space no one watched closely. She changed habits. She stopped staying late on her own. She went with friends to the labs. She left earlier. The narrative here is not about one terror-filled confrontation. It's about the erosion of belief in institutional systems. Doors can be locked and still be bypassed. Doors can be secure at waist height, while the ceiling, a place no one thinks to check, offers a loophole. What haunts her now isn't a face. It's the image of a tile shifting and a space above no one polices. The story is a reminder that security is patchwork. It's the places you never thought to look that become the point of entry. And the person who did this, if they were ever identified, was never mentioned in the account as having made physical contact. The terror was in being watched, in the idea of being subject to someone else's curiosity in a room you thought private. 3. The third account is Annabelle's, and it comes from the UK. She was 16 then, early in the school term, still rotating into the routines and rules that make a new year feel like a second chance. Her school required an ID lanyard beyond the foyer, a card system designed to keep the building safe. The lanyard was both an instruction and a promise. If you had it, you belonged. The man she encountered had his badge flipped, the wrong side facing out. For a moment, Annabelle's instinct was kindness. He asked for help carrying bags from his boot. In the UK, a boot is what we call the car trunk. It seemed straightforward, an adult who needed assistance, an easy thing to do. She says she remembers the quiet between buildings, the cold snap of early autumn, the thud of the classroom doors closing behind her. There was a discreet choreography in the halls, students moving in groups, staff on patrol. The man approached as she returned from the bathroom during class changeover. He was older than most of the teenagers, his badge flipped to show the wrong side. Just before they reached the car, she noticed 2 men in the back seat. Annabelle didn't at first register them as part of the plan. The man who had asked for her help seemed to fold into a kindness at first, then grabbed her arm. What she describes next as a sharp animal reaction. She twisted, broke free, and ran. The school's automatic glass doors were the threshold that saved her. She recalls the sound of the doors opening and the breath of air from the foyer like a promise. Staff inside saw her and immediately responded, calling her parents and the police. Security footage captured the men in the car.
According to Annabelle's account, the suspects were later caught and charged with attempted kidnapping. Annabelle's aftermath is a long and painful process. She missed school for weeks, the kind of absence that turns the halls into a place of rumor and a heart into a place of waiting. Therapy became a rhythm she hadn't anticipated. She had nightmares, sudden spikes of anxiety in places that had once been ordinary. The people around her were kind, but kindness doesn't unmake the physical memory of being grabbed. The school tightened its lanyard policies and reviewed entrance protocols. For Annabelle, any proximity to cars after that day felt like a hazard. She describes a carefulness with which she now approaches parking lots and a suspicion that arrives at the first sight of someone with their badge wrong. Her story has a rare cold comfort, security footage and charges. The fact that the men were identified and charged matters. It's the legal recognition of the attempt and a form of accountability. But it doesn't erase the violation, nor should it. The world keeps moving. Injustice sometimes arrives with a stamp of officialdom, but the survivor's work of grieving, repairing, and learning to move in the world again is quieter and longer. IV. Across these 3 narratives, a pattern arches. The places we assume are safe, our dorm rooms, labs, school entrances, are only as safe as the systems and people who uphold them. Small oversights can create openings. A roommate who betrays trust, a ceiling tile no one checks, a lanyard improperly displayed. Each story rests on a seemingly small misstep. None of the narrators invites blame. Instead, they each point at the structural and interpersonal failures that let harm happen. There are practical lessons without simple solutions. Security systems must consider unexpected vectors, ceiling cavities, maintenance access, the human factor of people letting others in, or assuming that human decency will be enough. Staff training matters. Knowing how to respond when a student reports a concern can make a difference in outcomes. But rules and protocols are never enough on their own. They need to be paired with a culture in which reports are taken seriously and survivors are supported.
One of the survivors I spoke with said something that stayed with me. It's not just about locks, it's about how quickly someone believes you when you say you were scared. That line reframed the conversation for me. Institutional responses, whether housing moves, security checks, or police reports, are vital. But what often lingers is the small human exchange that either validates a survivor's fear or minimizes it. When a student walks into a housing office and their fear is met with empathy and swift action, it changes the trajectory of recovery. When it's met with doubt or bureaucracy, it makes the survivor feel twice invaded. There's another recurring theme, the residualness of fear. After the events, life continues.
People go back to classes, schedules resume, but personal rhythms are altered. One narrator needed to sleep with a light on. Another stopped staying late alone in the lab. Annabelle avoided certain pathways and required months of therapy. The trauma lives in small adjustments, tiny rituals meant to stave off panic. Those adjustments aren't signs of weakness, they are adaptations, human ways of rebuilding a sense of agency. If you or someone you know has been affected by any of the themes in these stories, intrusion, stalking, attempted abduction, there are concrete steps that can help. Reporting to campus security or local police is an option, and it's one that many survivors find necessary for their sense of justice. If you're not ready to report, speak to a trusted friend, a counselor, or a student advocate. Universities and schools often have confidential resources that can help you plan next steps without forcing immediate legal action. Therapy is a real, valid place for recovery. Professional help can give tools to process what happened and to restore daily rhythms that trauma disrupts. In the video description, we've placed links to general crisis resources and to guidance on campus safety. If anything in these stories triggered you, those resources are a start. Some practical safety reminders that bear repeating because they're anchored in the realities these narrators described. Keep your doors locked and check them when you enter or leave. When staying late, try not to be alone. Buddy systems matter. Report anything that feels off to campus security and get a record made. Trust your instincts. If something makes your skin crawl, that feeling is a signal, not a weakness. Institutions should audit not only their doors and cameras, but the hidden architecture of places like ceilings and service areas where someone could gain access unseen. It's not fanciful to expect schools to think through these vulnerabilities. Students should be able to study without wondering who is watching from above. I want to be careful here. None of this is a magic list that guarantees safety. The survivors didn't fail by being in those spaces. They were victims of choices made by other people. The point is to recognize patterns, to look harder at the bits we take for granted, and to push institutions toward vigilance and compassion. One last thing. The emotional labor of telling these stories is immense. Each narrator returned to a night that lives in their body, to the minutes and small details that mark the space between normal life and the moment it tilts. They did not ask for a dramatic finale. They asked to be believed. They wanted the record to show that ordinary places can become dangerous and that the doubts that linger afterward are real and valid. If any of these stories resonated with you, consider sharing this video with someone who needs to hear it. If you've had a similar experience and feel able to, leave a comment. Tell us how you found ways to feel safe again, or what your institution could have done differently. And please, if this triggered something for you, check the description for helplines and resources. There are links to crisis support and to information about campus safety advocacy. These are true stories that haunt not because they are rare, but because they are familiar. They ask us to look at the small seams that let harm in and to demand better, more careful locks, more thoughtful oversight, and an immediate human response when someone says they are afraid. They also remind us to listen, to believe, and to hold the survivor's need for space and healing as the first priority. Thank you for listening. If this collection mattered to you, hit subscribe for more verified first-person accounts and share this with anyone who might need to hear these warnings. Check the description for resources and sources. Stay alert, stay compassionate, and if you're in a place where these stories are still raw, take care of yourself. There are people and services listed that can help you through.